Hello guys and welcome to an NGB video review. I'm Ben and I'm joined by Matt. How are we doing, Matt?
Hi Ben, I'm really good, thank you.
Excellent. And Matt has been playing Nex Machina for us, the latest from Housemarque. How have you found it?
Really good, actually. Yeah. I mean, it's. I think we were talking about a few minutes ago before we started the recording about how good it is. I think it's one of my favourite twin stick shooters. Really ever, and certainly in the last few years. I'd certainly say on this generation, it's my favourite twin stick shooter.
Wow, that's some high praise. Now, I mean, personally, I'm a big fan of the Housemarque series, of their games. Super Stardust was one that captured me on the PS3, and I still play Resogun on the PS4 to this day. And there does seem to be a lot of that in Nex Machina. They've taken a lot of stuff that they've learned and kind of kept that old school feel, but at the same time they've put a lot of shiny graphics and modern touches to it as well. I mean, how did you find sort of getting on with the mechanics and things like that? Because it is a very, very difficult game.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's super hard, but it is also, I think, very, very simple. There's kind of really only three things or four things you need to think about. So you've got movement, you've got your traditional twin stick shooting style, which is whichever direction you press. The second stick or the face buttons is where you'll shoot, and then you've really just got the special weapon and dodge. I like the dodge mechanic. I like the introduction of that as something a little bit different. And I think as the game gets harder and it starts to migrate a little bit away from being just an arena-based shooter where you've got enemies chasing you to something that feels to me to be a little bit more like a really crazy bullet hell, particularly some of the bosses where there's so many on-screen projectiles. The dodge mechanic becomes absolutely indispensable. I mean, there are some enemies that you simply can't get past without dodging effectively, and so that adds a bit of complexity whilst not actually making the controls materially harder. It's all about hand-to-eye coordination. So I think it is a really, really hard game, but I didn't find anywhere in it where it descended to being overly frustrating. Some of these kinds of games, as I'm sure everybody who's watching this video will know, they make you want to smash the control pad through the window.
Absolutely, yeah.
Nex Machina brought me close to that, and there are some technical, I guess, issues which maybe we can talk about later that I thought were kind of a little bit of the kind of some graphical issues, for example, that I thought made the game a little bit harder than it needed to be, but overall really, really solid for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point you made there about when it gets to sort of the bullet hell stuff, and you definitely need to dodge. There's one boss in particular that I can't remember the name of off the top of my head. I think it's the third one in, and you've just got like these pink rocks essentially just flying at you constantly, and it's an absolute nightmare to get past. And this is just on the standard difficulty, but it's a very, very demanding game. And I think the thing is with the bullet hell stuff, you had that in the likes of like Resogun and Super Stardust, but it almost became second nature once you started to learn the enemy patterns and stuff like that. You could start to you almost didn't have to be looking at your character to know, right, I'm definitely dodging this this bullet here or that thing there. It's just it's one of those where it is, I suppose it's a bit of a cliche really, but it is easy to learn and very, very difficult to master it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the reason why I've started to liken it a little bit to bullet hell, when actually I think it sets out the stall as a twin stick shooter, is because the way I've always played the really crazy kind of Japanese bullet hell games that kind of define that genre, I tend to look at my character and I make very small minor adjustments to their position whilst not looking at where I'm firing, but just intuitively using that that precision that you get from having a second stick controlling the exact direction of your fire. You can play. I think you made the example of the third boss. The third and fourth boss, I think, are similar to this. There's so many things coming after you, that if you make a large movement, even sometimes using the dodge button, you're going to end up in trouble. And all you need to do is just hop from left to right, up and down, making those minor adjustments to get around those things that are coming at you. But at the same time, you've got to train your weapon on the enemy, or else you'll repeat that pattern too many times, and eventually you'll die just because of the law of averages. So yeah, I definitely found I started to play it more like a bullet hell, perhaps for the back half, whereas initially, it felt a lot like me. Say the first arena, for example, was so close to, say, a Smash TV. It reminded me of being 9 years old again, playing on the NES.
Awesome. So you mentioned a couple of the technical issues. In terms of that, I think the game runs extremely well, and for the most part, it looks really, really good. What was the sort of stuff that you were mentioning there? Because I know when you say about graphical stuff making it harder than it needs to be, is that just when stuff's exploding and sort of going everywhere, or is it?
Yeah, it is. It's really. I found there were some. I think this could be down to personal interpretation, and certainly I think this might be a game where for example, if you're colourblind, you might have some issues with it. For example.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, I'm not colourblind, but what I found with, you might have come across some of the pink lasers that are kind of often persistent. There's a weapon firing at a wall, and the purpose of that weapon is to hold you in one location until you can take out the weapon. And there can be an intense amount of pressure coming from behind, up, down, wherever, to drive you towards this laser barrier. And I just found sometimes, perhaps just because my brain can't cope with so many things on screen, that these lasers, I just walked into these lasers as though they were part of the background. And it's a very minor complaint, but particularly once you get off the lowest difficulty and you're onto a limited number of continues, every life is going to count. And the other one really is a very similar issue, which is in the lava world. There were some little spinning wheel enemies, and there were only one or two stages where there's kind of a little bit of almost like lava beneath the walkway that you're standing on. So it looks like slashes of lava through a bridge, for example, made of wooden slats. I don't think that's actually what the game depicts, but that's kind of the imagery. And when these little wheel things do their attack, they also look like they turn into orangey red slits, really. And more than once I ran into those guys, and that's just because I hadn't registered that they were not part of the scenery. So kind of things. There were no technical problems. It was kind of just, maybe I wish they'd picked a different colour for the laser. But then again, pink is the colour that most things that threaten you have. So the lasers make sense that they're pink. It's just that sometimes, for whatever reason, I didn't spot them. So
yeah, I get what you mean there as well, because like you say, sometimes there are points where there's just so much going on, it almost backs you into a corner, and you kind of end up just nudging it, ever so slightly, and you think, oh yeah, that's knackered it. But one thing that I did like about this was when you die, you don't pick up where you left off. You kind of you go back to the beginning of the level, if that makes sense. But it's very instant. You don't have any loading times or anything like that. When you die, you just go immediately back to the start, and it's games like this that encourage that one more go kind of thing. Like you need to have that instant replay, and I think it's great that Nex Machina has it, and the way that it deals with a lot of things in it, I think, is really, really good.
Agreed, yeah. And actually, one thing I really liked about that is that I kind of noticed this might be again one of those subversive things that didn't really happen, but I registered it enough times to think that it did, which is that particularly on the first and second difficulty levels, if you do end up dying in the same room, say twice in quick succession, maybe in the same spot, often I found a power-up would spawn as well at a convenient time and place, maybe a shield or a special weapon. And I think that happened enough times to help me.
That's from what I've managed to gather from that. I think it's the last power-up that you had. When you get killed, you drop that power-up for you to pick up again the next time round.
Yeah, but that does go away on the third difficulty as well, to some extent. Or again, maybe it was the way I maybe you know, the third difficulty is so hard that I could be killed within less than a second on some levels.
Yeah,
So.
it's insane. So that is Nex Machina. It is, as we say, it's the new PS4 exclusive from Housemarque. We both really like it, and I think the written review should be up around the same time as this is going up as well. So I think it, you know, no surprises that it comes with a glowing review from us.
I think it does, yeah. And my closing thought would be, if you liked early 2000s trance and hard house, it's got a great soundtrack as well. But don't play it before you go to bed, because you won't sleep.
No, that's absolutely fair, and I think that the soundtrack one is it reminds me of Wipeout in a way that it's not necessarily the kind of stuff that I'd listen to, but it fits the game absolutely perfectly.
It sure does, yeah.
Yeah, so that is our Nex Machina review. Thank you for joining me, Matt, and thank you for watching, guys. If you have enjoyed this video, please like, share, comment and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Ben. Bye-bye.